Hello and welcome to the Arn and Eddie experience. I am the aforementioned Eddie Sideburns, the second man in this podcast. Still not getting paid for it yet, but we're working on it, Arn. We're working on it.
We're working on
Uh,
it. We'll get there.
yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine now. Not like I'm living in a life of not luxury just yet, but we're still carrying on. Joining me is Arn Furious on this lovely Sunday, where we all tried to get up for 12:30, and stuff
I'd just
massive.
like to point out I was here on time.
Oh, okay, okay. Well done. There's the applause. There's the slight clap of applause. Golf clap,
Introduce the
if
guest.
you will.
Introduce the guest, Eddie.
Yes, introducing the guest. Thank you. Joining us for our first episode with a guest is Grapple's own JP Houlihan. JP, how are you?
Very well, lads. It's been a surprisingly lovely day, and I'm delighted to be able to be on here as your first guest. I'm very honoured, and
Yes.
it's lovely seeing you, lads.
Well, we're glad to have you on. I think we had before we even thought about having guests on, we had a little guest shortlist, and like I think you and Benno were like the first ones on there. So it was like we'd love to get one of you on first, and then the other one later.
We want to just break the ice before we realise that we both go live at the same time, roughly about 9 o'clock on Mondays.
Hey, but it's all right. There's no artificial Monday Night War here. It's all good.
Yeah, that's for sure. So we're here to talk to JP about his love of the beautiful game of football, which for you, with the team you support, might be quite recently being quite a depressive type of football, would you say? Or tell us a little bit about how your love of football and how it began.
Oh, okay. So I mean, a lot of it is due to the fact I grew up in North London. So originally I'm like born near enough in Tottenham in a place called North Middlesex Hospital. But my dad was a massive Arsenal fan when he moved over from Ireland because there was a lot of Irish players playing, was the way that teams were at that point in time. So very heavy amount
So
of
it's like the Liam Brady kind of.
Even kind of like slightly pre that, sort of like when you even getting back to the likes of kind of Pat Jennings. And but you would have like kind of Brady. There would. I'm struggling to remember a few of them now, but it's like kind of early 70s. So he was into Arsenal. Then that kind of was just then passed straight on to my brother. My sister, he just kind of thought, in his way, thought she's a girl, she won't like football, and he got that massively wrong. Became an enormous Spurs fan. And then with me, I think there was a case of him thinking that my sister was trying to turn me because she's like 8 years older. So he just took me to see Arsenal play. It was David O'Leary's first testimonial that I went to. Yeah, which was, I want to say like 1984 against Celtic, and Celtic won 2-0. Mo Johnson scored.
Mo Johnson.
Yeah. So that's how it started. And I think then when you're going to school in that area, you just don't escape it. It's like you're kind of either one or the other, but it's very much like that kind of Liverpool, Arsenal, that Liverpool Everton thing of split across the cities. David O'Leary.
Look at him.
My word.
He's
an incredible looking human being when you put it like it is like artwork, isn't it? It's almost surrealist.
Painted that.
It is. It's like it's a glorious jersey. He was there. He's like I still want to say he's our most capped player because he played like 2 decades.
He's been because I remember he's been obviously went on to management and stuff like that, and he became like obviously he's well known for the Irish team in the World Cup and the penalty shootout against Romania. So would you say he was probably one of your favorite players growing up, or who kind of had that role at that time? Yeah.
It would have been him. I mean, there was kind of he would have been definitely there, although he didn't play for Ireland that much. That's kind of one of the stories with him going into the 1990 World Cup. He was more of a ball playing centre half, so Jack Charlton didn't really like him. He would, hoof it up to Tony Cascarino and the like. He wasn't really taking part in that type of stuff. I was a massive David Rocastle fan. as a kid, like kind of really from around sort of like 86, 87 when he was like breaking into the side. And like I was gutted when they sold him, which I want to say was to Leeds.
Okay.
But yeah, I was absolutely kind of heartbroken. And there was partly the thing where there would be like the players who were very, very local. So like, and a lot of that Arsenal team were, it was absolute. I was absolutely heartbroken when he passed away. I got to meet him once. It was in a nightclub in Kingston, Kingston upon Thames. This is, and he was there with Frank Sinclair and Jody Morris. I went up to the bar. Frank Sinclair was going to talk to me. I was like, I have no interest in you. And Rocastle had been kind of frozen out of the side under Ruud Gullit. And so it was, went up to him and I was like, mate, what are you drinking? He was drinking Smirnoff Ice. It was the early 90s, sort of mid 90s. These things, yeah, terrifying times. And he was like, oh, you don't have to. I was like, mate, you won me a league in 89. I think the least I can do is buy you a drink now. And I had a quick chat with him. It was lovely. But then he, dead within 5 years, which was like really just shocking for the time. And, played well for England, like whenever he got a chance, but never really got a chance at England level. But yeah, he was like my childhood favourite.
Yeah. So he was your kind of childhood favourite growing up in terms of that. And in terms of, obviously, you've seen Arsenal kind of grow obviously over the time that you've been a fan of them in terms of that. What would you kind of say has been the kind of historical kind of highs that you've seen and the historical kind of lows that you've seen from supporting Arsenal?
Oh, over that time, I mean, I suppose when I first started really following Arsenal, it was kind of in the George Graham era. And
I always hated George Graham. Hated it.
Some of the football, mate, I wouldn't have blamed you.
Yeah, when I was growing up, I mean, I've always detested Liverpool. Like, I've always hated Liverpool. But then the two teams that I really disliked when I was a kid was Liverpool for obvious reasons, and Arsenal because of George Graham. Like, if I'd grown up with Wenger in charge, I'd probably have a much better opinion of Arsenal. I certainly like them a lot better now because we're above them in the league. But also because I feel like they're a less hateable club now. Whereas Spurs have always kept that nice plane of being able to dislike them. And I always hated Liverpool. But yeah, Arsenal in the 80s for me was rough to watch.
It really was. It was Don Howe who was there first of all when I was there. And Arsenal kind of historically are kind of interesting anyway, because they're like, if we're being realistic, we're massive underperformers in Europe. We've like well behind Man U and Liverpool in terms of championships. And also the only period of football we ever dominated to any degree was like the 1930s under Herbert Chapman. So we've always been a side who's kind of generally seen as really about sort of third biggest in there, and historically the kind of biggest club in London. But like over the time I was following them, like for me the first big one would be when Charlie Nicholas scored twice against Liverpool to win the League Cup in 1986. Because beating Liverpool in 1986 wasn't something that a lot of teams did. So it was enormous. And we went one down, and Ian Rush had scored, and he had a record where Liverpool didn't lose if Ian Rush scored first. So to kind of break that, and Charlie Nicholas was another player I loved because he was creative. And then in the great George Graham purge, Champagne Charlie wasn't allowed to stick around.
I mainly, obviously,
he looks drunk in that picture.
It wouldn't be that surprising if he was.
You mainly forget that he is kind of he's had such a historic and kind of probably a quite good football career just purely because of his punditry and how much he tries to have banter, and it really doesn't work well at points. I remember he played for Celtic. Obviously, I didn't see him when he played for Celtic, but I remember hearing about his time at Celtic and being quite interested. There's the one where he has a go at Jeff Stelling and tries to say something about glasses or something like that. Just make yourself the big one. It's okay, Arn.
Mate, it's a struggle today.
I know. Listen, we're getting through it still. Yeah. So he would have been kind of that was kind of the first kind of historic kind of high that you experienced by being an Arsenal fan in terms of that. Would there be any others?
Oh, I mean, I'd say the really kind of defining one is 1989. And
winning the league.
Yeah, winning the league.
As much as I dislike George Graham, that was hilarious.
Well,
doing Liverpool at Anfield.
It was one of which wasn't going to happen. There was all of this kind of everything about it. It was like the last game of the season. Hillsborough had happened that year, so there was a kind of delay of games for Liverpool, which kind of meant because of the various vagaries of the football fixture list. We were playing them last. We had to win by 2 goals. It was away at Anfield, last game of the season between the two sides who were kind of going for the title, which is pretty incredible stuff to think of it. I mean, we talk about the Man City, Man U one, and it's like, well, they're playing different games. It's like not against each other in injury time. Yep. Watched that game with my dad and my uncle, who wasn't interested in football, but he's like my mum's brother, which we were just there in the front room. It was just incredible. And you just got the feeling, I think, in the first half. And there's all these kind of instances in the game. And it's when you could pass back to the keeper as well. So there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of just like play it back to the keeper.
Liverpool did that all the time. So when watching Liverpool in the 80s, people who grow up now don't realise how painful this was and why they changed the rules. But Liverpool, they used to pass so Grobbelaar would have the ball. He'd roll it out to Alan Hansen. Alan Hansen would pass it to Mark Lawrenson, and then Mark Lawrenson would pass it back to Bruce Grobbelaar, and he'd pick it up. And they'd do that for about 10 minutes at the end of the game. And it was just...
It feels
I'm glad you did them.
Yeah.
They deserved it.
And it was the way... It was Michael Thomas as well, and Michael Thomas was never, like, kind of one of the biggest players for us, and then went to play for Liverpool and scored the winner in a cup final, which is, again... pretty incredible that they signed him in the first place, and it was just amazing. Like all of the commentary kind of sticks in my head. There's a documentary about it called 89. I've read a few books about it as well. Me and my dad like nearly hit the ceiling. He took me to the pub later on, and like I wasn't drinking. I was like kind of 11 years old at the time, but like I can remember waking up next day in my Arsenal kit, and I videotaped the game, so I was like watching it again. It was just absolutely like the first time like I've gone completely berserk over it. And I remember people like hearing just people like beeping horns all throughout the streets. Yeah, that was great stuff.
It's one of those, like, it must be purely one of those moments because you've, as you said, you've grown up, you've started to love them, you've started to support them. They finally won the league. You know, I think I know they won the league in 1991, the 1991 season. I think after, I imagine the appeal of that it wasn't as much because obviously of what happened in 89-90.
Yeah, it was pretty comprehensive as well. Like we'd won the league, we'd lost only once that year to Chelsea away, and and Liverpool, Dalglish had gone. So like there was, and Man U weren't the force that they were. Leeds weren't the force that they were. You were still having sides like kind of Wednesday and Villa at that point in time as kind of nominal challengers. But that season, it felt like we were kind of like away from everyone else.
Yeah, and then as obviously that league and the English First Division kind of comes to an end, and then the Premier League becomes a thing, and Arsenal kind of. What was kind of your thought process for Arsenal going into, or kind of the Arsenal's time when it started becoming the Premier League in terms of that? How have you think Arsenal's been for that stage? I would say
we still had George Graham. The football had just become attritional. Any flair player had been sold. Anders Limpar, Rocastle.
Yeah, we had Limpar. He was lovely.
Yeah. I was completely gutted. Again, he was just tremendous. We ended up with like a kind of centre mid, which ended up playing in the game against Parma, of like David Hillier and Ian Selly, who were average at best.
Bang average, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. They were like completely the definition of bang average. but they were there. Like anyone with any real flair were there. We just collected centre halves, and we had that defence, which was the thing that kind of kept us going over that.
That's
time.
all I remember about that defense is like the line of arms up in the air, and it's not. You'd have the linesman going, "Well, probably offside." Tony Adams said it was. I mean, who am I to argue with them? All of them, like, bang, arm up in the air.
It always made. I mean, I loved it was in the full Monty as well when they managed to kind of do that as part of the routine. But it was also made me wonder why England had never tried out that back four, and there were good reasons why they weren't. They wanted players who could play the ball out of centre half, which, given it, fast forward on sort of like 4 years, all of a sudden they were playing the ball out of defence and they were going forward and volleying goals into clinch titles. It was like, I don't know quite what's happened here, but at that point in time, it was very, very attritional. Graham got sacked because of like a bung scandal, but we had the moment against Parma, and then the next year we had the moment against Zaragoza, which were like, and we were at pretty low ebb. We were finishing like comfortably mid-table, and we looked like we'd signed John Hartson and Chris Kiwomya one day, just waking up, and we bought 2 strikers. Like, what is going on here? This is mad.
John Hartson,
he was all right though, Arn. He was Hartson. He did a job for us, and then we'd sold him. Like, I want to say we sold him to Wimbledon.
Yeah, I think he went to Wimbledon, then he went to West Ham, had a fight with Io Burkovic, and or was that before that? And then went to Celtic and spent his time at Celtic for quite a while. The Zaragoza one, that was the one with the Naeem goal, wasn't it?
Naeem, from the halfway line.
Yeah,
that was brutal in school.
Yeah, that must have been.
And I was in school in an area which would be slightly more Spurs.
Okay.
And at that point in time, I was living in Tottenham, and it was just awful. Like the grief you'd get.
I appreciate Mike geeking out in the comments for John Hart.
He's right. British transfer record for a teenager, 2.5 million. It seems. I mean, he was real potential. Mike would know much more about this than I would. But at that point in time, like he was kind of banging in the goals. Like I don't want to say he would have been Division 2 then, Luton. Or was it Division 1? Could have been the Lenny Lawrence days.
Yeah. Because then, obviously, as we're talking, because obviously Graham goes due to the bung.
Yep.
You then bring in you then bring in Wenger. Is it Wenger right after? Or is there
Bruce
something else?
Rioch.
Oh, it was Rioch. Okay.
Stuart Houston finishes out the season and manages against Zaragoza.
Okay.
But then at the same time, we get Rioch in for a year, who'd been at Bolton, and Bolton had been doing pretty well. They ended up having Bergkamp.
Okay.
And it was very odd because it was like we'd signed Dennis Bergkamp, but it wasn't a Bruce Rioch signing. So there was kind of, even at that point, kind of rumblings of like, how long's Rioch going to be here? Is he a stopgap?
Yeah.
And even at that point in time, under Rioch's regime, there'd been mention of this guy in Japan who was managing, who obviously none of us had known. But we had Rioch for that year. He'd fell out with Ian Wright famously when he said that he wanted him to base his game more on like what John McGinley was doing for Bolton. And Ian Wright didn't take too kindly to that. So he came in with like a cardboard cutout. But it was better under Rioch. We was 7th. Bergkamp took a while fitting in, but in hindsight, it was like the best thing that could have happened.
They kicked him for a season. That's what happens with a lot of players that come into the league. Is like they get kicked for the first year, and some of them deal with it and move on and get better, and some of them just don't fancy it and go somewhere else. And that's happened quite a lot.
So
Dennis could be filthy as well. Like
I think that's why he stayed. He was like, I can get away with more stuff here.
Oh yeah, there's once or twice a year he'd just stamp on someone, and you wouldn't quite be sure like what brought it about. And it was just like, there he is, just reminding you every once in a while, even into his like kind of early 30s. It was just like, well, should get sent off at least once or twice.
Yeah. So obviously Rioch for a year, and then this man from Japan comes.
Oh.
Tell me kind of, just because I don't want to go into too much detail, but just your overall thoughts on Wenger's time at Arsenal from beginning to kind of end, in essence? I can imagine you could probably do a love song about him at this point,
Yeah,
JP, I'd imagine.
generally glorious. But he stayed too long. That's probably how I feel about it. But it doesn't get tarnished because of how we are at this point in time and what's happened kind of post Wenger. It's like that legacy actually has kind of really held on a lot stronger. He reinvented how people thought of us. I mean, Arn mentioned it earlier on, like Arsenal in the 80s, but if you're growing up and this is
They
the
used to
version
chant. They used to chant boring at you, didn't they? Oh, it's boring,
yeah.
boring Arsenal, and they were boring.
They were
fantastically boring to watch for quite a long time.
I can remember going to games where, to be honest, in the North Bank, it was people just completely like smoking away, put it that way, and also people reading the Standard. Like they were just sat there, like kind of like because they were bored under like the kind of latter years, and he completely changed that. And he did a lot of stuff that was bring it like obviously the famous changing of the diets, getting in the pasta, and he completely revolutionized it. So by the time it was like 97, 98, when we won the league, it was just incredible. We went on and it was just completely clicked, especially in the second half of that season.
Yeah.
And we won like kind of 11 games straight, including like away at Man U, which you're talking kind of prime Fergie years, Man U.
Yeah, they were a good side that year. I mean, it was it was touch and go as to who was going to like win everything that year, and it was you lads.
Yeah, we were the only side who, I mean, given how amazing they were and how amazing Ferguson was, they needed a rival. And we were the ones who kind of fit the bill. And that's why I never think that there was kind of no lasting animosity. It was just like they needed each other at that point in time to be rivals with. And you had the nice contrast between Wenger and Ferguson. But yeah, over that point in that period of time, it was generally glorious. And then it hits moving to the stadium, which I knew, and I think a lot of fans realised, right, we're not going to be challenging for a while because we're going to have to make ends meet in order to pay for this. And we did okay. But yeah, sorry.
Do you really like Highbury? Oh, sorry, Eddie, go on.
No, it's fine. I was actually going to say that move, that because when you're moving into a new stadium, that's where the finances are like. It's pittance for players. You're not getting the millions that you would normally expect coming in and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, this looks brilliant.
Yeah, I don't know if either of you have been to either Highbury or the Emirates. I mean, they're very close to each other. So
I've been outside. I've been outside one of them. I've been outside both of them actually, just by staying in an Airbnb that was nearby. And
you can see the difference. You can see the upgrade that they did in terms of quality.
Yeah. I could remember when they made the North Bank all seater because there was the things out of the Taylor report as well, which kind of really put the limits on the stadium. I mean, when I first went, you'd have all standing in the clock end and all standing in the North Bank.
Do you have a preference? Like, which one do you prefer?
I'd be saying Highbury, simply because of the intimacy. You're like kind of very closed in. It's one of those kind of older grounds as well. It's like kind of mixed in with all the housing. So that's the reason why I can never expand it. But that has its own charm to it.
Very similar to Goodison.
Yes.
That's like right in the middle of a housing estate. So you're like walking down a street with all terraced houses, and then there's a ground. There it is, right at the end of the road.
Benno there was one of those roads, and at the top of the road was Goodison Park. And I was like, that's absolutely incredible. And you walk around the ground, and it's like a wonderful throwback. Whereas even though the Emirates is in very central, it's very near Holloway Road, it's still one of those kind of multi-kit stadiums. And for a long time, they didn't have any of the kind of designs or the stuff they'd put outside of the older players and stuff like that. So it was like very much like a concrete soulless bowl. But I was there for its opening when it was like a Dennis Bergkamp testimonial. So that was fun.
And obviously, since we've talked about the Wenger era, we've got to talk about the players that he signed, or at least quite quickly the players he signed. Could we specifically talk? Are you comfortable being an Irishman talking about a certain Frenchman?
Oh, I am. Heartbreaking. Still not over that.
In terms of the signings that Arsene made, obviously when he had the likes of Anelka, Viltord, Henry, obviously. Out of this entire time, who would you say have been like maybe your favorite signings that he made?
I mean, I have to say Henri, because I was lucky enough to be going a lot more then in the early 2000s, because I didn't have young children to kind of deal with.
Disposable income, isn't it lovely?
Exactly. Yeah, there were times when it was like, then, before we had kids, it'd be like sort of me and my girlfriend going, do you want to watch Arsenal play? And we'd manage to get some tickets and we'll just go and watch it. And you could do stuff like that. But yeah, that was, I would say Henri and Vieira are really kind of the ones, and Dennis. It gets very difficult because it becomes like who are your favourite children type of stuff. But that it feels like they were the kind of really big ones with Vieira, Henri, Bergkamp. And then underneath that, you are very slightly underneath it, you've got this tier of kind of like Pires and Lundberg and Lauren, even players like that who are Kolo Touré, who arrived.
Petit as well.
So, Emmanuel Petit, who when we signed him, he was like a left-footed centre half, and it was just like playing him centre mid. And between him and Vieira, there was very much a thou shalt not pass. Like we were just completely there, like nope, no one's going anywhere.
And you've got like the likes of like I remember players like Jose Antonio Reyes and Edu and stuff like that, and just Gilberto Silva. These are players that I remember purely because of obviously a season that I didn't know. I think we'll talk a little bit about it. The Invincible season, which must have been something to experience.
It was absolutely incredible because I was able to go to a few games that year, and it was amazing. Like sometimes they would kind of push it a little bit. There were like a game against Charlton, I can remember, where we won. I want to say we won 4-1. It was like the back heel game, but for a long time it was like kind of reasonably kind of turgid, but we would just drag out wins, and if nothing else, we'd be getting those.
Was it in that season where Perez tried to pass a penalty?
I don't know if that one or the next one. It
was around there, wasn't it? Because like he had this reputation for just walking the ball into the net, but that was just really like taking the Michael.
I was going to say
pass a penalty. Yeah,
exactly. Very much extracting the urine. It's ridiculous.
It was one of those ones I remember obviously see video clips of and you think, what on earth are they trying to do at that point? Because then another player comes up to him and stuff. I'm not completely sure, but I do remember there was a moment against Portsmouth where I think Portsmouth were winning 1-0, and then I think Arsenal equalised late on during the Invincibles. I cannot remember.
Right.
But I just remember how it was like one of those ones where it's like you keep going and you keep, it's like they could lose, and then just suddenly they seem to pull it out of nowhere.
It was, we just got into the habit of just not losing, and completely for a lot of the time. Even the game against I think Wigan at the end of the season, that was slightly touch and go, and I want to say that was like Wigan at home. Like we were I think. Might be thinking of the right one, but there was always a few of those where it was kind of ropey. But again, we underperformed in Europe, which I think was one of the really frustrating things that side kind of never did that. I don't know if it was that year we lost to Chelsea, which was like
It was, I've got up here. In the
it is kind of
in the groin.
It's kind of astonishing to me that Arsenal went from this like all-time great Arsenal team, like the best you've ever had, and that was the last time you won the title.
Yep.
Like there's been nothing since. It's astonishing, really. I know Chelsea spent a lot of money, and that kind of affected the makeup of the division. But it's bizarre that they were so good, and then there's nothing after that. It's just weird.
Well, the players we were going to sign, in some cases, Drogba, Essien, Cech in particular, Chelsea came in and bid a couple of million more, which appeared to be the Chelsea transfer policy at the time. Who does Wenger want? And then just bid more because we would be financially restrained, because even then they were talking about moving out of the ground. So that did change it. And then the stadium changed it even more. And it became that we needed to get rid of some of the higher wage earners and still somehow get into the Champions League, even with these kind of weaker sides. We did come, I mean, I would say that the season with the Eduardo injury at Birmingham, that was one that I thought we were going to do well. There was a point, I was at the Leicester game at home. We beat them 2-1 in the year that they won that. I thought we were going to go on and win the league after that game. I was there with my son, and it was like Danny Welbeck coming back from injury in injury time, scoring like the winner. And I thought we were going to win that. But then we would inevitably play someone like Swansea at home the next week and just have catastrophic defensive errors.
It felt like every team that season just didn't particularly want to win the league. So you'd see a team get a little bit of momentum, and then it was like they just bottle it again.
The oddest,
you're all at it.
Yeah, the oddest of times, and that was it. We just kind of lost. We never really replaced the people who were there. The world of scouting had changed as well in that time. We were able to get in on players very early, and that market had kind of exploded because we proved what the benefits were of that point in time. So, and other clubs were coming into the mix. So it felt like the only way we could compete was to actually change grounds, which meant going through a bit of a short-term decline.
Yeah, and I mean, going through that, obviously, I think the season, obviously after the Invincible season, I think the nearest kind of big achievement would have probably been the being runners-up in the Champions League final against Barcelona in 05-06, because you had a good run there. You went on and took out Real and Juve, and you didn't hold, and it was one of those ones where like you were finishing fourth in the league, but you just went on this run.
That Barcelona team though was unreal.
Yeah. And even then,
and you didn't help yourself really in the game.
There's the sliding doors.
Got sent off after like 5 minutes or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, 10 minutes. It was the sliding doors moment. What happens if we go one down and we've got 11 on the pitch? And it was a very weird run because for a lot of that run, we had a really makeshift back four. And the story is that Martin Keown had come in to coach the defence. He lives in Oxford, and he did a lot of, and he just came in specifically to do coaching with them. We had Senderos at centre half, I think, with Toure for a long period. Sol Campbell had kind of walked off. That had happened during that period of time, so he hadn't played. Ashley Cole was in that final season, and he'd had his contract disputes as well.
Was this when he was getting tapped up as well at this point? Or
when he was getting tapped up by Jose in Chelsea and meeting him in some hotel and that type of stuff. So Flamini had played quite a lot of games. So it was this really makeshift defence, but they were just like a well-oiled unit, and they hadn't conceded a goal in Europe for ages. What was funny, and it's at time of recording, obviously, we got Villarreal on Thursday, but we've got like the one game where we really looked ropey was the Villarreal away, where it was like we were suddenly expected to kind of win this. Oh, mad Jens. Mad Jens.
I want to quickly ask, Lenz or Seaman? Lehmann or Seaman?
Oh, Seaman. Seaman, just because he was there that bit longer. He was, there's things that people like. There was a lot of banter going on with him to be like sort of, shaking his backside. And the rest of it, like when people were asking him to, it was all good fun with Seaman, and he was there for a long period of time, and so there was like the kind of legend element of it, and his deep Yorkshire voice. It was just I always loved his accent, but we never hired him as goalkeeping coach, which is an absolute travesty.
Yeah, his time. That shot,
by the way, that's a really bad kit.
Goalkeeper kits are like that, though, aren't they?
Oh, and then obviously one of your favourite.
Okay.
Obviously, when Lehmann got sent off in the Champions League, and your aforementioned worst Arsenal players to ever play, step up, arise, Manuel Almunia. And then obviously Larsson with the 2 assists to help Barcelona win it after I think they went 1-0 up, didn't you?
Yeah.
And then
I liked Larsson as well.
I think everyone loved Henrik Larsson, even if you were, unless you're a Rangers fan. I think everyone loved Henrik Larsson at a point in time because he just played phenomenal football.
As a quick aside, I remember going to my once meeting my dad for a drink, and it was the night of the UEFA Cup final. They were playing Porto in, and hadn't realised that where we were was the North. It was a big meet-up for the North London Celtic Supporters Association. So like, absolutely heaving, the atmosphere, just a wild game, just like wow. And I'm less bothered about that.
Oh, the road to Seville and then the road to Manchester for both Scottish teams getting to cup finals is when they get onto it.
Stevie
Obviously,
Whittaker.
won't talk about some of the names in that squads. At some point, you just have to look at it. Baffling.
I'm just gonna put that in there because it marries up so perfectly.
His love of fishing was always there. Yeah.
Can I just quickly go back to that because I was just looking at the searches at the top of it and it said David Seaman and Pizzagate.
I don't know how he was involved in that.
Okay, that's why you don't randomly click on search
right
in the middle of a podcast.
That's brilliant.
Initially, I thought Pastagate. Then it's like, oh, that's the QAnon stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, let's not.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on. Let's move on before we suddenly implicate David Seaman and QAnon. So talking about, so obviously we go into then, and let's go on to kind of, let's quickly have a summary, obviously, of this season and where Arsenal have come from now. Over the course of the new managers that have come in since Wenger has left. What's been your kind of thoughts? Is it very turgid bad football and just won't the right players being signed but just the manager's not working well with them, or
there is I want to be sympathetic, and then I think when he played against the first leg against Villarreal and hadn't picked a striker, you're just like, you're too clever for your own good now. This is ridiculous. And I really, really, really want to love Mikel Arteta. I want this to work.
I really like Mikel Arteta. I really like him.
My inclination is to stay with him, but the start of next season would be enormous. And there's also a thing about where our squad has been filled with so much dross, players on enormous money and long-term contracts. And only now are so many of those ending and going away. I mean, you look at the effect that Mustafi and Kolasinac already had on a bad Schalke side to kind of discover that. But there's a lot of players.
We're keeping the record going of mentioning Schalke on every single podcast.
Yeah. Purely for Lucas. You see them and you think, and you see when they go in and they just started making mistakes, and then Tierney's I'll just use the one Scottish man who's in the team. Tierney's made of he's so injury prone. And he's a good player, but just very, very injury prone. But yeah,
he's spoken about as future captain. Like, people have just fallen in love with Kieran Tierney, and just so that's why there's been a few players at Celtic who've been linked recently. I mean, Edouard is something who seems to be constantly kind of linked with us. I think overall where we are, we need to get there's a core of the squad that needs to go. There's a core of younger players who are worth sticking with and investing with, I would say, pretty much for the most part. I mean, even like a Joe Willett coming back from Newcastle. I mean, there are some players, there are some difficult decisions, but really it's a streamlining of the squad. And it's putting together a squad who can play the kind of football that he wants. Yeah. He's made some bad choices at time up front, and deals like the Willian deal are frustrating because it's 3 years on money that we can't be affording to pay. And how are we ever going to get rid of him?
That should have been 12 months and then see you.
I'm still baffled by...
There's a lot of talk that we might keep Luis because they want an experienced centre-half, but Saliba has turned out like what they've just sort of wasted. They never even tried him. So he's away at Nice, and you're hoping he plays well. But
and there was a lot of situations with Saliba that kind of got investigated with stuff that's kind of been going on as well. So... And there's that kind of also thing about, obviously, there was the whole rumblings at the beginning of the season that Lacazette was on his way. Because he was going
Still think he will be.
You think this is the final swan song of the album?
I think so. I think we will have got, 5 years out of him. And I think that's as much as you can reasonably expect, I would say. And and he's never going to be a goal scorer for us at the kind of 25, 30 goals a season, which is kind of where we would want to be. I'm not sure he's entirely like mobile, and he's able to adapt, and he works better with that when he's got like the younger lads behind him. When you have like a kind of whether you've got Odegaard, Smith Rowe, or who else in there as well. There's a lot more access to that, but I think Lacazette will go.
Yeah, and is there any kind of youth players that you've seen that you think they'll definitely be around and they'll become an Arsenal they'll become the next kind of generation of kind of great Arsenal kind of superstars in terms of that, as long as you don't sell them off to Aston Villa for 22 million?
I got the Martinez deal at the time. I understand with the benefit of hindsight. Like I think it was a case of you stick with Martinez over Leno. Although Leno has kept us in a lot of games early on this season as well. That's not to be like even the game the other day. Martinez he was glorious, and he deserved to be a number one somewhere, getting big money and getting in with a chance of being Argentina keeper. Awesome. Been in my fantasy league team pretty much from the start of the season. But yes, young players. I mean, Bukayo Saka would be like the obvious one there. Him and Smith Rowe. Martinelli, who I look at as a project player, whereby when he does get a run and he finally gets in that side and he can get like a kind of a clear run of games, I look at him as a player who we will probably end up selling to a big club for like 120 million. I would also, there's a lot of younger players. We've just signed a guy to a long-term contract. There's been a kind of up in the air with it, but Florian Balogun next year would be a player to look at unless we send him out on loan. Because I don't think Eddie Nketiah, he's meant to be very good. And it's still up in the air who will declare for. Like there's a few countries, he's born in the States as well. So there's been kind of a lot of talk about that. And in Europa League, he scored a couple. There are some players out on loan who are kind of interesting. Like I think actually at Blackpool, weirdly enough, Daniel Ballard, he's been playing for sort of Northern Ireland under 21, Northern Ireland full side. I think he's been very good.
Yeah,
there are some players coming through, and I think that's the route you've got to go down. And I think that's the route that we have to go down. It doesn't mean immediate glory, but if you can do that and supplement it with a few experienced players, I'm happy for that, and I'll be happy with mid-table finishes because I would be accepting that they're not going to be great every week, but also that they care.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously the thing is, you might be able to buy the man who owns Spotify quite soon.
I feel like with the youth players that you've got, I think that gives you hope.
Yeah, and it is a good system, and there are players coming through, and the potential of someone like a Martinelli, if he gets a run at games. I mean, when he first broke in, he looked like this is someone who's absolutely serious. The fact that Saka has played a lot this year, and I think that gets forgotten about, that the lad's exhausted. And
I think a lot of players are now because it's been such a long season. Just it feels like the last one just kind of bled into this one, and then you're going to get the Euros piling on the end of that. And I think next season, a lot of the players are just going to be absolutely shattered. The big players, anyway.
I think so.
Just the thing is when you play Football Manager and you watch the games, the amount of games you have to play in a row at that point, and you think to yourself, if that's the congestion there and the players in that game are tired, what are the players who are going to be actually playing the games in real life going to be feeling like?
Yeah.
A lot of them look really tired now. It's like you're getting towards the end of the season and players are just looking really leggy. And I watched a little bit of the Wolves game the other day, and they just looked exhausted. Like the whole team just looked like it just wanted to go on holiday.
I honestly thought that watching bits of Everton Villa, like last night.
Everton are the same. They're knackered.
Yeah.
If we think all these players are knackered, we should see the probably state of Bielsa's Leeds players, because the way he plays his football, they look
knackered as well.
They lost 2-0 to Brighton.
Yeah, I played Brighton yesterday. I watched the highlights last night, and they looked exhausted. They're all exhausted. They're all knackered.
Yep.
Football, you can see it also happening in the lower leagues, where weird results are happening around the playoffs. I'm following Oxford, like seeing, and next week being the sort of last weekend of it. You can see that happening there. There's a few wacky results that are happening across the board, and you're going, oh yes, because they're all completely wrecked.
Yeah, exactly. It is what it is. Right. So we're going to finish off with 4 quick questions. You can go into a little bit of detail as much as you want about certain things, but these don't have these good news. The Arsenal part of the therapy is over. This is just about football in general. So we're gonna ask 4 questions. The first one, favorite tournament that you've seen, experienced, or just favorite tournament that you thought this could be possibly the greatest thing I've seen or watched or heard about.
Mexico '86.
Okay.
Good lad.
Mexico '86, first World Cup, load of goals. You had Maradona in his pomp. It was like, and you had big teams, big players. Yeah.
I was hoping for that so I could get
Denmark
PK.
side. Sorry, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I like how they've decided to go. Obviously, you've got Mexico, you've got Argentina, you've got all the flags. The Union Jack's there, which
It's
yeah,
it's not terribly accurate.
but Mexico '86. So that would be your one of the. I mean, Scotland were there, so I'll take that, of course.
I mean, Italia '90. I know for obvious kind of being an Ireland fan reasons should be there. Even kind of '94. They were bad World Cups. Like at that point in time, I was more cognizant of what was a good or bad game, and it just appeared to me that like watching Mexico '86, I was just hooked because it was just that's what everyone in the house was watching, and there was just a ton of goals. Yeah. Oh, what a side! What a side!
So we'll go definitely with Mexico '86 then, but I think Italia '90 has a nice place in your heart. Then I take it at that point.
Oh, absolutely. Tears when they beat Romania, and tears when they went out to Italy. Even though they should have done, they went through the tournament without winning a game. There's a lot of revisionist history that follows that Republic of Ireland side.
It was a good side. I mean, Paul McGrath, even though he didn't have knees to speak of, but like what a player he was. Like if he hadn't been on the booze, he would have been considered like on a par with like your Bobby Moore level of intelligent central defenders because he was that good. Ridiculously good.
Roberto Baggio talked about his top 3 centre halves.
Yeah,
played up against top 3 defenders, and it was like Maldini, Baresi, and Paul McGrath. And it was like, and it was the fact that McGrath didn't train, but his his positioning and everything about, and just the surprise. It's all completely up there. He was just incredibly like clever as well, and he just so dominant.
So Paul McGrath, Kejimuto's knees. That's pretty accurate.
Yeah, that's pretty much, yeah.
It's nice to see we've got Paul McGrath and Ivan McGann listening in and talking about Kejimuto's knees. So we move on to that's I'll update the spreadsheet in a bit later. Favorite player. Now this is not someone obviously favorite player you've seen, just favorite player that you've watched and thought this is the one of a kind generation talent or one of a kind, the greatest player you've ever seen.
I'm going to say Zinedine Zidane.
Okay.
It's a kind of a slightly, it might feel like a slightly strange choice, but there was something about. I mean, at that point, I think I was in full blown football hipster mode as well. In the kind of late 90s, I was in university and the like, and it was the way that he could take the biggest of games by the scruff of its neck and just effectively win it when it really mattered, like when you had brilliant players all over it. And that is kind of part of, I look at this, it's like part of the glory of it. It's a polarizing film, but I always love the Zinedine portrait, the kind of, it's very much an art house. It's an art installation really with a Mogwai soundtrack, but it's amazing. Of just following Zidane on the pitch for 90 minutes, just seeing the way he controlled a game, seeing the way it was like a kind of a less flashy genius, because just what he did was kind of quite minimal and streamlined, but he would just do it amazingly. And then there's things like when he would take that goal, I want to say it was at the European Cup final where it was it Hampden? Where it was
Hampden against Leverkusen and he did the volley. Yeah, the volley.
Yeah, he does the volley. And then there's things where he would, like that World Cup final, for example, like, in 98, that was it. And famously, Man United didn't want to sign him because he'd had a bad Euro 96. They signed Karol Poborski, whereas the truth was he played 60 odd games because Bordeaux were in the Intertoto Cup And they got through to the UEFA Cup final that year.
It's another mention for the Intertoto Cup here.
One of my favourite defunct tournaments, a bit like the Anglo-Italian Cup. It was just wild times.
I think the only real strike against Zidane is that it didn't look like he was having any fun. I always felt he was a bit too mechanical. He just like he wasn't enjoying it.
I've also feel like did you know? I mean, I should be saying Maradona. Like I really should be. I've got a Maradona shirt, like, and all of this kind of stuff. I've just sort of realised I was like, why aren't you saying Maradona in this? Because he's the epitome of someone who was having fun while playing football.
Oh yeah, he loved it.
Or arguably too much fun at times, which was certainly part of it. But yeah,
if he hadn't liked the old Peruvian marching powder so much,
oh yeah,
there wouldn't be a conversation about who was the greatest player of all time.
Yeah,
it wouldn't exist. They'd be just like, well, obviously it's Maradona.
I always look at when you're ranking footballers, I always think you go by generation of it, and like the later generations are dealing with much better defenders and defenses and much like.
But also they've got better pitches to play on, and they don't get kicked so much. If you look at some of the games that Maradona, I don't want this to turn into a Maradona cast because we're going to do one of those. It's going to be good.
Oh yeah,
but he got kicked up in the air like on every game. And you see the state of his legs when he was in management in Mexico when he was hobbling around because he'd just been kicked his entire adult life.
Oh, exactly. I mean, and especially like that 82 World Cup where he's getting absolutely, Italian defenders are kind of digging their nails into him as well as kicking him all over the place as well. I always think that one of the things I've never enjoyed following football is this idea of Pelé as the greatest footballer of all time. I mean, I'm one of those people who... There isn't like I haven't got disgust against Pelé for it, but like I always feel like this is what the corporate world wants you to think is of the greatest player of all time, and sponsored by MasterCard. And the reality is, there's a massive snarling face of like a Maradona who really is the greatest, like the kind of the best footballer of all time. I think there's probably that part of me though that just loved seeing Zidane at that point in time and that France side at that point in time because it was such a heavy Arsenal influence as well. So I kind of fell in love with them. We were signing French players all of the time as well. So it kind of like the whole thing tied together.
Did you kind of hope you'd get Zidane?
Yeah. Always. I had a friend of mine who's a Liverpool fan. He would do things like try and instigate, like he wanted to see if he could create transfer rumours to get onto Team Talk call-ins that people would do for football gossip to see if he could start Zidane to Liverpool, see if the papers were getting on it and they'd go along with it. I would have loved us to sign him. As soon as he went to Real Madrid or like Juventus, it was like, oh, that's over with. We'll never see this bloke.
I mean, yeah, you could tell just one quickly thing on Pelé. You could quickly tell that it is FIFA and UEFA's kind of trying to back that he is the greatest footballer of all time. Someone breaks the goal scoring record. Oh, we've just found this book that has 700 or 30 more, 300 more Pelé goals. So it's definitely something that's been kind of made to kind of get away from it.
If we're talking about players getting kicked out of tournaments and stuff, though, like Pelé legitimately got booted out of 2 World Cups. Like he got injured because he got kicked so much.
So 62 and 66, isn't it? He got an absolute shoe-in over those.
Yeah. So he only really had 2 great World Cups, like the 58 one when he was a kid, and then the 71 where the Brazil team was just so good.
We could go on.
That's an episode as well. We'll come back to that.
We could go on forever to talk about Mike Bassett, England manager, actor, Pelé. But we won't because we'll be here for a while.
Victory actor, Pelé.
Oh, hey! Mike Bassett, England manager, is much more better because he walks in on Ricky Tomlinson, absolutely half cut.
It's a great scene. It's also the level of disgust he's got in his face as well. I was like, quite good at. That's as good as I've seen him ever since the famous commercials that he did.
Yes,
emotion
those
you'd
ones.
see from him.
So Zidane, World Cup 86. Let's go on to talk about favorite football shirt. And do you own it?
I own a copy of it, and it's the Republic of Ireland 1990 shirt that they wore that I think you might have had a picture up earlier on. It was just one that I fell in love with. It had opal on it. I should see if I've got it. It's slightly damaged. I must confess. I actually need to get another one, but I'm gonna get it now.
There we go. There it is. There while JP roams around for it.
Yes, there it is. And I don't know if you can see
Oh,
that
there he goes.
There it is. It's a lot more older, damaged version of it. I love that shirt. I mean, a very close one is the Arsenal 70-71 shirt, like even the home and away. But it was the first of those Toffs kits that I bought, and I had a long sleeve Arsenal one, like the one you had with an O'Leary picture earlier on, was just like classic football shirts where it was just there was no sponsor or anything else. And I always look for Arsenal. Our natural away colours are yellow and blue. Yeah, yellow shirt, blue shorts. Yeah, that's just I've got one of those, and it's great. There's that one, and then there was there's the away one. So that's 70-71. Just because I like it, there's no sponsor on there. But if there is a sponsor on there, JVC would be the.
And did you own? Did you try to do a thing where you tried to own as many Arsenal shirts, or were you kind of always looking for the next kit? I mean, in that day, I don't know what the difference. Sorry, I was born in 1993. I'll be completely honest. So in that kind of time, was it kind of? I know. Sorry,
just jealous.
Sorry, granddads. Was it kind of like that point where you try, obviously, for football kits and owning them, and obviously owning the most recent Arsenal kit? Was that something you could try and do consistently, or?
I didn't really. There were some kit choices that they did that were just absolutely awful. And I think when some of the sponsors came in, I was never a big fan of the Dreamcasts. When they had that kit in, I was like, I'm not mad on Dreamcasts. I'm not that bothered. And I think as well.
Can we get your opinion on this shirt?
Oh no.
It's the bruised banana.
You say that. My son has the bruised banana one that they brought back. And it's become like kind of one of these fashion retro things. He's more into getting a shirt every year, and I'm weirdly more predisposed towards that. I think for me, I like the kind of classic ones. I don't mind that shirt as much. I mean, I kind of prefer plain yellow, but there was one they had about 92, 93 that I want to say was like kind of green and blue. And it was just a horrendous, absolute shirt there. I remember Stuart Robson wearing it. It was just an awful shirt, just terrible. But yeah, I would have a few, but I was never like kind of every year. I also enjoyed like getting other shirts from around the world. That's one of my things to do. And if I want to lose a couple of hours, go onto eBay looking at like kind of classic shirts.
I mean, you don't need to tell me much about eBay purchases.
Mate,
money well spent. Money well spent.
I kind of have a wardrobe that's there, which there's just a load of shirts over there.
Yeah. And the Boca Junior shirts as well seem to always be brilliant, even looking through variations on that. Oh, glorious stuff.
What would you say is probably, so if we take out the Republic of Ireland one and the Arsenal one, what is the one shirt that you've bought that you think this is the best thing I've ever purchased? This will be forever. This will be enshrined with me at that point.
Oh, that's a tough one. There is a shirt, and it'd be a bit of a nightmare to get out because it's kind of in this sort of like storage, but it's a shirt I got when I was traveling in Mexico.
Okay.
And it was an America shirt. So this was in the year 2000. And we were traveling around, and I didn't get to see a game, but I did go on a tour of the Maracanã. Not the Maracanã, the Azteca, which is on the outskirts of town, and it's just like this gigantic behemoth of a ground. Yeah. But I did get to, I did in there bought whether or not it's authentic, I'm assuming not. It looked from one of the more credible places you could go to, but an America shirt, and I absolutely loved it. Yeah, it was.
What did it look like? I'm just seeing if I can find it for that.
Oh, it's kind of, I don't say it's like a Bocca's one, but it's kind of like blue, mainly across like, how am I describing it? What's the color I'm thinking of for it?
I don't think I'm going to find that anyway. So I'm just looking at stuff.
I'm trying to think if I can find it for that, but I've had it in storage for a while. It's like kind of a nostalgia one. I mean, it's not something I can wear. I was a much thinner man, but there's that one. I would think for me, but that's like kind of nostalgia one. But then when I've gone to Turkey, I'll buy like a shirt. Like I've got a Besiktas shirt and stuff like that. They're just like primarily. I remember having a Dutch shirt around like kind of 90s. I always enjoyed those ones. I do want to get a Denmark shirt from 1986 as well. I think that's a beautiful kit design. A Columbia away shirt that I saw you wearing. Well, is it a Columbia home one you've got, or a Columbia away?
Oh, the one that I'm on. Yeah, it's the Columbia home shirt that I went on to a wrestling show with on the day. Oh, that's just beautiful. That I went into a wrestling show with, and then did a thing at that point. Yeah, that is a Columbia home shirt from the World Cup. It was just when I went into a JB Sports, and it was just there. I've got like one of the prized possessions other than this one, I'd probably say is the Japan '98 shirt I've got, because I love the '98 World Cup, so I've always tried to like find shirts from that period because it's just one of the ones that's fresh in my memory. So yeah, that's mine. If we move on, so last question. Now, I think we've probably already answered this during the conversation, but if you can avoid maybe talking about the Frenchman and maybe think outside the box, who would be your favorite manager?
Oh, favorite manager. Then I'm probably then going to get a bit more like it wouldn't be favorite manager. Oh,
we've stumped him on.
Because I want to say, obviously, like instinctively, I want to say Wenger. That's like kind of where my head goes. There's things for Jack Charlton, but like I'm trying to think slightly more outside of the box of other managers I kind of really loved. There's a part of me that really loves Zeman, partly because of early Italian football on Channel 4 and him managing various sides. Like, here's Foggia and here's Zdenek Zeman in charge. And he'd just be this kind of like rowdy old man. He'd be like somehow like coaching these Italian sides. Favorite. I'm probably going to be very boring. I'm going to go back to. I'm going to say Jack Charlton because it's more than kind of management. Like,
I can definitely spell that.
Yep. Yeah, it would be. Sorry. Yeah, I'll go with Jack Charlton for that because, like, and the documentary is incredible. The recent one.
I was going to mention it because obviously you were talking about. He talks about UK. The Being Jack Charlton documentary was incredible. The talking about the Paul McGrath kind of situation, and he's like, and obviously one of the things again you were saying before with the David O'Leary kind of not liking him and kind of just getting really consistently annoyed that people were keep asking about when David O'Leary was going to get picked.
He also quit at the right time. You could argue that 94 would have been really the right time, but he had that run. He had that playoff game against Holland in 96, and it was like he was gone. But what he did, like for that point in time, in terms of the level of enthusiasm and everything else, and it's always one of these things where I was never again given a choice for this. Not that I hate my mum's English. It's not that I ever hated England, but watching Ireland was so much more of a joyous experience. Because it was like there was so much other stuff going on with that, and especially
I have a lot of issues with watching England because I hate half the players, usually because they play for teams that I don't like. So it's not so much fun as it should be.
At that point in time as well, it was like England fans, frankly, like
tournaments
being
terrible,
absolutely hellacious, and they were just
there was the
awful.
There was a game against Ireland where it got stopped
95
through. Yeah.
Undeveloped.
All the chairs out and throw them off the top deck.
Ireland all 1-0 up as well. David Kelly, if you can remember him, ex-West Ham striker. He scored, and then that happened, and that was just like the worst. And that was kind of like emblematic. It was like, well, it's very hard to support a side where this is like a big constituent of the fan base, and no one really wants to do anything about it.
I just want to put this picture of David Kelly because I love his hair.
Era. That was always the great thing of having like, it was like having that as the, rather than it saying like Republic of Ireland, it would just say like era. Oh, those sticker books, man, from 86 and 88.
The classics, yeah. I think I've still got the Mexico 86 one.
Euro 88, Ireland were all right in that tournament. They had players like Ronnie Whelan, who scored an amazing scissor kick against the USSR. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Jack Charlton, obviously, just kind of seeing him build that Ireland squad from the beginning and getting the job. Like,
my favorite thing about that Jack Charlton Irish team was he managed to work the system. So it's like if you had an Irish relative, or if you'd visited Ireland, or if you owned an Irish setter, then you could probably play for the Republic. And the players he called up would be like, "Have you ever been to Ireland before? Can you find it on a map?"
There was a lot, and I always think you mentioned Mike Bassett. I kind of enjoy that scene where like England, Scotland, and Ireland meet up in the
and they keep calling Ireland the England B team or something like that.
No, let's give it up for the England B team. It's just, and he's like, why you put that accent on? You're a Cockney, aren't you? I mean, it's kind of, I mean, and in some ways, I'm kind of emblematic of that. Of like you can get that Irish passport in there without ever having kind of lived there at any point. But there was like Cascarino was the famous one because he found out it was his mum who was adopted. So like his grandparents weren't actually his birth grandparents, but it doesn't matter. It adds to the folklore. It's not that he didn't love playing for Ireland or care. It was like, okay, fine. And for the most part, I think for a lot of footballers, it was like a wonderful break away from like the kind of hard grind of playing week to week English football. You never like. Those boys went out there and they were like, can you imagine the tabloids covering, like, if the Irish tabloids at that point in time were like the English tabloids, just them stopping off in a coach, just going out for a big session, just a load of them, like have an all-night session, really like kind of bunk off the train and just go, kick it long to the big bloke. We'll be all right.
It's just, it's honestly like an experience to see how he's built, obviously, I say how he's built up that squad and how like they've managed to, start builds up slowly, and then obviously you get to the 90 World Cup and they start, they go on that great run. Then they start 94 off and they get the vengeance back against Italy with the 1-0 win in the group stage. And it's really just good to see that they how they, and then obviously he's, I'd say in 96 he's kind of realized that's the kind of drop off point, we're not getting anywhere, and he's kind of left rather than being sacked. Because I genuinely think and I'm pretty sure, I don't know if it's in the documentary, but he probably wouldn't be. I don't think any Irishman or anyone in charge of the Irish Republic Football Association would probably want to sack Jack Charlton at that point.
Nah, the FAI would have struggled for that, but they kind of had. They did. I mean, I think Mick McCarthy had just gone into management at Millwall. So I think there was the idea of they can get McCarthy in because he'd always been like the captain there as well. And that started off similar to the Stephen Kenny reign with just like a rake of defeats and never beating anyone and not having a striker as well for years. Seeing Gary Kelly play up front the old game and you're like, what is happening here? Kilban.
And then you go from Mick McCarthy and you get this you get was it McCarthy then it was Wright Trapattoni, or was it someone else before Trapattoni?
It was McCarthy, and then I think I want to say it was Staunton.
Oh no, Staunton.
It might have been, was it McCarthy, Staunton, then Brian Kerr, which is kind of like controversial because he never was given as much of a chance as he hadn't done well in the qualifying tournament, but yeah, that was they've cut, and then they went down a route of spending money they don't have on managers who were just there to get them through to a tournament so they could get money in advance to pay off massive amounts of debt. And now Irish football is a whole other massive conversation. It's not in the greatest of places, possibly at the lowest of the lows that they can kind of get to.
It definitely seems to be on a rebuilding point.
Yes. You've been through this, Eddie, with Scotland, and Arn, you would have seen this with England enough times in the past as well. It's just
I have ignored the English football team for the last 10 years or so, and it's gone great.
It is good.
Don't regret it. Don't regret it at all.
It keeps everyone else happy. I'm all right.
We have to suddenly give you some kind of international team to support at some point. Maybe you could go support Gibraltar or something like that.
I watched from the Philippines, so like technically, I'm a fan of the
Philippine
ASCAP.
national side. There we
They're
go.
terrible. They're absolutely god awful.
Really?
Yep.
There's not like some
Everyone
young
plays-
prospect
everyone plays-
out in Manila there somewhere who's just tearing
Everyone
it
in the
up.
country plays basketball, which is strange because like the average height's about 5'3", and nobody likes football over there at all. Nobody plays it. It's bizarre. They've got an enormous population as well. They'd probably have a decent side because there's not a lot of great teams in Asia. They could probably do quite well, but no, nobody's bothered. You get it a bit around Manila, but that's it.
Yeah. But yeah, unless there's anything else, I believe we've answered our 4 questions. JP has got Mike Kilby has a Gibraltar shirt. That's no surprise there.
Proper footballing hipster work there. Well done, Mike.
If it's a hipster shirt, Mike Kilby probably owns it. But yeah, football. I do want to ask one final question, because we did have a topic on it, and I know Arn's in his head going, the timing. I know. The European Super League obviously happened, and then died a death. We covered it on an episode, and Arn got into an argument with an American. It was funny. I just sat there. We just let this guy go on at points. It was real. Funny stuff. Your thoughts on it, obviously, because Arsenal were one of the teams that were involved in it. And where do you kind of see the future of football kind of going? That's kind of my final question, I think.
Oh wow.
Arsenal are winning.
There's a lot you could go into. Oh, get in. That's all right. A pleasant surprise. Who scored on?
El Neni.
Wow. Wouldn't have predicted that, and I'm imagining the bookies are very, very happy. No one would have seen that one coming. I thought the European Super League was disgusting, much like everybody else. I mean, I actually kind of hope that
if they'd gone through with it and they'd actually left and joined this Super League, would you stop supporting them?
Do you know what? I was discussing that with my son. I was like, the thing is, it's the idea of us, where would we be finishing? 16th at best? Like, really, we're like entering a league to basically be near the bottom. Would I've gone to games? No. Would have been. I think at that point the disconnect would have really been there. Like, it would have been like, right, that's, I don't know what this club is, but it's not Arsenal. And European football, who wants to see a league of group games and the rest of it? I fear it going down that route. I think if somebody is kind of smarter, then what I would like to see happen, and I don't know if it's the future of football, is getting the timetables of the leagues all in tune, because I think that's part of the issue. And then what you can have is possibly in those off years where you're not having World Cups or European Championships or Copa Americas, have a kind of decent club tournament that might be worth its salt, where you might have a period of time where that's the case. I think that would be the best thing all round for kind of TV. And I think at that point, what you might have is MLS sides who possibly are more likely to be able to compete. Or, I mean, it's hard to see like a K-League or a J-League side kind of break out enough to kind of be able to threaten it. And South America will always have big sides. And I think that might be the route of going down it, because I think if this whole European Super League proved it, that there isn't any, it doesn't matter how much JP Morgan put into this, there's no actual fan interest in that. And that fan base that they're looking for is a fickle fan base. Not legacy fans as they would want to. So yeah. I honestly think that's the way that I would like to see football going down. That, like, you can have that big club tournament, but you need to have everyone having that in tune. And it's something that people have argued with African Nations Cup and the like, kind of at various times, that global timetable for me would be the thing that, if you were wanting to do something good, I think that would then benefit everyone, benefit international football as well in terms of timings for that.
And there was part of me that was, obviously, because you said there you'd spoken to your son about it, and there was part of me that kind of thought, what did the younger generation think of it? Because the younger generation, unlike you guys, have, you've been football fans for yonks and yonks, whereas...
Sorry, Jazz, just left you have anything to do with JP Morgan.
I wish I'd robbed them. Honestly, that's what I had wished.
Um, but one of the things was,
Mm.
did your son want the Super League to happen, or was he kind
No.
of on your? Yeah, I was kind of expect because the younger
Yeah.
people are like, well, we want to see all these massive footballers play each other and consistently
I
go up. But
don't think they do, because
I'm
obviously
wondering if
we've got
some do.
Josh in
That'd be
our
similar to us.
predictions league thing, and
Oh, poor Josh.
he's like 18, 19 years old. I can't remember which, but yeah, he was very firmly opposed to it. He supports Chelsea, and he was literally going to move to another club because he didn't agree with it. So
Yeah.
I don't think anyone supported it except maybe like the people that exist in Florentino Perez's head.
Yeah.
Well, I think those people were probably across the pond, if we're being completely honest, because
Oh, the Septics were loving it.
you had Americans coming left, right, and center going, "This is gonna be great," and then you're just like, "No."
It's the franchise system. Football doesn't work. The roots are too deep. It's not you. Franchise systems just cannot work. And franchise systems from really what period of time? We're talking the 50s, 60s in the US as kind of being the things where they sort of start up. It's like, well, we're talking football clubs that have roots in historic industries where, people's great grandparents would have known people who worked in the factory where that club is set up and the rest of it. Yeah, it just doesn't work.
Yeah,
And and I think a lot of them realize, a lot of the younger fans realize that as well, and that's part of the appeal.
I just wondered if obviously there was a younger generation, and again, it's always generational differences where they've maybe seen the same thing and they kind of do want to see the best players in the world play each other, not in a World Cup format. And as I say, in the Champions League, and normally I'm still, by the way, Arn, I've still not got my head around the new Champions League format. I have no idea what that is. We recorded that podcast on Monday, and I've still not got around to looking at it or caring about what it is. But yeah, and again, I know people were playing off as like UEFA and FIFA the good guys, and they weren't. It was basically two bad guys fighting each other, but just you wanted one bad guy to win over the other bad guy, if we're saying the words. But yeah,
And it was very handy for UEFA and FIFA, wasn't it? This European Super
It was like when Gollum killed that big spider.
Yeah, it's not Gollum's good now. No.
Gollum's still a greedy little whatever word I was going to put in there. But yeah, that's I did kind of wonder whether there was a generational kind of difference. But probably not. You would have probably moved on to supporting Oxford, wouldn't you?
It would be. And I was season ticket holder at Oxford for sort of 3 years, and then I kind of stopped. And then there's that part of me that was actually thinking, right, well, in that case, so I like to go to Arsenal. I normally go to Arsenal like a couple of times a year, and obviously not recently, COVID and the rest. Part of me just thought I'd invest in them. They've got a chance of being in the Championship. If they don't go up, they've got a good manager and they've got a good young squad, so they look like to be one of the better sides to watch in League One. I'm happier with that kind of, and I think that's something that people who support big clubs should do and do more often. I think in some ways that's part of the trade-off is watching the kind of smaller sides. And I mean, I watched a lot of Oxford in League Two just after Chris Wilder, who was not liked by the time he'd left, even though he got them out of they were playing horrible football. But putting money in Oxford, happy with that. But then I'm also the kind of person that if I was visiting somewhere, like I was up in Liverpool a while back, I remember just going to watch Tranmere. Tranmere versus Rochdale with a few people at wheel, and I like Ben O'Gareth and Andy Ogden, and just like, let's go and watch this for the day.
Just quickly, did Jeff Jarrett's Tranmere win?
Do you know what? It wasn't. It was Rochdale 3-2, and Andy had to keep stum because he's nominally a Rochdale season ticket holder. Oh yeah, like season ticket holder, and they're like, had to. But it was a great game. It was like Rochdale were like 3-0 up, and then like Tranmere scored 2 late goals, and then there was a good bit of goal mouth action. Just like a great game. And
that's the thing. Lower league football is one of the lower league, and going to see lower league football. It's always good because you're supporting a team that's nearby when you can. You're watching. It can turn out to be either a boring 0-0 draw, or it can end up being something quite exciting. And you just think, well, you know what? I'm not in a massive stadium where the football isn't anywhere near me. I'm in a nicely sized stadium where I can see the football up close and personal at points.
It's relaxing.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
That's what football is. Football is just relaxing. Anyway, I believe we're running out of time. I know. He's. I'm gonna get an earful from it, JP, when you leave.
Sorry,
It's
I do
okay.
rabbit on. I apologise.
Oh,
No,
I
it's been
haven't
great. It's
sworn.
been great. Loved having you on, JP.
It's been great. What do you have? Go on, give us your plugs. Come on, you.
So I am on Grapple Spotlight, which is everyone can listen to that at various places where you get your podcasts. This week's on Tuesday. Normally it's out on Mondays, as we've already discussed earlier on. Also, we've got our Patreon, which is patreon.com/grapple. And I would say download the Grapple app. This is all to do with wrestling. And yes, the Grapple app if you want to rate and review matches. So I've been watching a bit of All Japan's Champions Carnival because it feels like a part of the wrestling world that I can happily watch.
Oh, there we
Yeah.
go. There we go.
There
he was
we
the
go.
MVP of Grapple in 2019. Oh,
It's actually not
Probably someone
letting me share
problematic,
the other
Eddie,
window.
I would say.
most definitely. There it is. There's Grapple on the Grapple. If we can,
It won't let me open it for some reason. So.
I'm like disgusted.
So
But
congratulations,
yes,
we've now got a feud with Grapple now. No, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure for you to be our
thank
first
you.
guest.
I've loved it, lads, and it's been brilliant to catch up with you. I really enjoyed it.
If you've enjoyed this experience, feel free to hit the subscribe button, which is like there, down the bottom, and smash the like button for us, and we'll have some more of these.
I'm sure we'll get you back on at one point for a small,
Yes.
quick tack to talk about Maradona, because I'm sure we'll get a ton of people to come in and chat about that at points.
Oh, that'd be lovely.
Oh yeah, would do. And also as well, at some point, I'll be getting back on that Football Manager bandwagon. It's just as a teacher. At this time of year, this is the worst possible time to take up any kind of football manager. So I've said to myself, when all the exams and stuff, all right, well, all that stuff's over and done with, then it's my time to shine on there.
Game's really good this year. So it's a really good game this year.
Yeah, definitely.
Look, it feels very, very fresh and new and different to what it was for the past couple of years.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we might try and get some kind of challenge on the go or something like that for people to take part in. Even though I'm
we'll get you in the Discord because we've got stuff going on. So we'll get you.
We got stuff going on. But listen, thank you so much, JP, again. We'll
you.
let you go and watch however much left of Arsenal there is.
There's plenty of time for us to ruin it. Good old defensive howler and a straight red card. It can easily turn around.
Joe Willock with a goal. But yeah. Thank you so much for watching and listening. We will be back tomorrow. Are we tomorrow?
Yeah, we're on tomorrow for our regularly scheduled episode. If Eddie's awake,
I'll be here. I'll be here. I'll probably be passed out at one point during the day, but I'll be there. And yeah, I won't talk about The Wire though. I might talk about Line of Duty a little bit because I've been just watching random television at certain points. can't wait to message you and say, can I steal about 5 minutes to talk about Line of Duty?
No, you can't. You can have 30 seconds.
Oh no. But no, we'll talk about some kind of sports. The World Snooker Championship finals on now and tomorrow, so we might talk about that. But you never know.
We'll have a bit of F1. We're going to talk about BT Sport pulling out of sport, so it's just going to be BT. So we're going to have a chat about that.
I was going to say probably that might be a grapple bit as well. Obviously with WWE,
we can very much see that being the case. Yeah.
But yeah, listen, thank you so much for watching. We will see you tomorrow. JP again, thank you so much.
And JP now gets to see the video for the intro video because he hasn't seen it before. So
I'm very excited for when we stop the recording to see his reaction and hear his reaction. But thank you for watching. Take care and see you tomorrow. Bye bye.